We're just talking about our normal working days and daily routines. So for me, it's up at 5 in the morning. I'm trying to get some sunlight so I can set the circadian rhythm so that later on in the evening I'm ready to go to sleep. So I'm up in the morning at 5. I'm out and I'm catching some sunlight, if I can, 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm also doing yoga. So there are two difficulties for me during my normal day. One is I'm so sedentary because I'm sitting in my office job for 8 or 9 hours, and I'm also driving for two hours.
That sounds all too familiar.
And it's a slow death. So sitting is a slow death. So in the morning, I'm up, catching some sunlight so I can sleep better in the evening. And I do 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of yoga, and also a bit of light bouncing or jumping.
After the yoga?
Yeah, after that yoga. And that's mainly to get the lymphatic system moving, which doesn't move by itself. And just get a bit of body movement and be energized. And then I'm driving for an hour and a half, or an hour between Bahrain and Saudi. And what I'm doing on that drive is I'm intentional about that drive being safe and done with some grace and style. So I'm not trying not to get cross with people, and also to do it safely, because without arriving at work safely and coming back in life is a bit pointless.
Yeah. Do you think that since you have been getting up in the morning, capturing the sunlight, doing some yoga, doing your bouncing, your mindset when you're driving has changed compared to what you were doing before, and therefore are you seeing results?
Yeah, so when I'm driving, it used to be a bit of rushing. And it was really important to get there on time, whereas now I found that if I'm driving more intentionally, I might gain a few minutes here or lose a few minutes there, but I arrive much more content, and the journey's been more purposeful because I've tried to drive as smooth as I can, and I usually listen to a podcast or an audiobook, so I'm learning as well, and I've arrived safely, which is the most important.
Drive to arrive, as they say.
Yeah, so I've really stopped rushing, and it's much, much better. And one of the beautiful things about my drive is that it's across a causeway between Saudi and Bahrain, which in the mornings is breathtakingly beautiful. So I've now really enjoyed that part of the drive rather than rushing it as fast as I can. I actually really absorb the beauty because I get to see the sea and the sky. And I switch off the podcast and the audiobook, and what I do for maybe 5 or 10 minutes on the drive across to the middle where the customs is, and then 5 or 10 minutes on the other side before I get into Saudi on the causeway, is I do one of the things that you recommended, which was breathing or box breathing. So very deep inhales into the tummy, holding my breath, then breathing out. And then once I've exhaled all my breath, to actually not breathing for maybe a few seconds. I'm surprising myself by how much I'm improving, and it's made a big difference.
You know, I mean, the more you do it, obviously, it's like anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's muscle memory, brain memory, mind memory, call it what you will. But your body gets used to it and gets fitter and gets more used to it. It's like a muscle. You train it, it gets stronger and better, you know, and lasts for longer.
Yeah.
When you try to tax it. No, that's excellent. That box breathing is fantastic.
And I think where I'm very different to you is that you know, my lungs aren't as strong as yours. I know you have very good VO2 max and all those things. For me, it's very difficult. So I think I'm finding it really immensely beneficial. So for me, just to recap again, it's yoga, bit of jumping around, intentional driving, and breathing. And this is all done by 6:30.
No, that's when you get up at 5. It's amazing what you can achieve and accomplish in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
And like you, it's something I started in the last few years, let's say 4 or 5 years, where I've appreciated getting up early in the morning, maybe not 5 o'clock, but getting up in the morning early because you control the day. You are in command of what happens to you in that part of the day. There aren't phone calls coming through, there aren't emails, there aren't SMSs or WhatsApps. You dictate what happens. And I think that's very liberating first thing in the morning. And like you, I get up probably about 6:30 in the morning, whether I'm in Bahrain or in Riyadh. My routine is fairly similar, apart from the drive between the two, once a week or so. But when I get up in the morning at 6:30, and I thought before we go to the rest of the day, you might as well get the morning routine for both of us done. I'm out walking for the same reason as you would be, because I want to get out in the sunshine, and we're blessed by being in Bahrain or in the Middle East where it's perpetual sunshine most days of the year. Obviously, it gets a bit difficult during the summer months when it gets a lot hotter, and in Bahrain a little bit more humid. But ultimately, getting out and getting that sun in the eyes to wake up that circadian rhythm, to say time to wake up, time to get moving. But going around, depending on the environment, some are a little bit more conducive to inspiring you to feel good about yourself, rather than some locations that may be a little bit more urban and not so exciting. But getting out, I think the important thing is getting out into that sunshine, walking for half an hour, 40 minutes. And when I come back in, oh, by the way, before I even leave, I probably consume a whole glass of water as soon as I wake up. And if I am a little bit more organized, sometimes there'll be lemon in there, sometimes maybe a little bit of apple cider vinegar, but water as a default as soon as I wake up. And that just starts to sort of hydrate the body from a night of sleep and using up fluid. Anyway, so when I'm out there, I walk, I come back, and then I adopt either a breathing session. I use an app called Othership, and they have a selection of different programs that you can adopt for waking up the body, but also at the end of the day to send the body into a sort of peaceful mode, into a sleep mode, but also during the day where it focuses on things like gratitude and things like that, where it just centers the mind. So like you, the time I finished and done my breathing techniques, done a few stretching techniques as well. I don't jump up and down. Maybe it's something I might introduce as well, just to shake things up a bit. But once I get to about 7:45, coming up to 8 o'clock, shower, shave, and over everything else, I'm then sat at the office or at my desk by about 8:15, and I feel that I've achieved so much. Once I get to that point.
And do you have? I remember you used to have a black coffee, but with MCT oil. Do you still do that?
I do. And I sort of, as a psychological treat, I when I wake up in the morning, have my glass of water, go out for my walk. I know that once I've finished my breathing techniques, I've got my coffee to look forward to. And because I intermittent fast a lot, I fast most days, and I won't have anything to eat till about 2 o'clock or something as a lunch or thereabouts. So the MCT oil I put into the coffee just gives me that bit of energy that the body can immediately access, especially the brain, so you don't get brain fog when you're working in the morning first thing. It just livens you up a bit more, but without consuming food. But I find it works. I notice it more when I don't use it than when I do use it.
There has been some studies recently that says have your coffee, but not at the very first moment that you wake up. Wait about an hour to 90 minutes. And I'm usually drinking my coffee 60 minutes in, and you sound as though yours is probably 16 to 90 minutes in.
Yes, and I know it will come to me later on, but the podcast, I think, Andrew Huberman, I think he advocates 90 minutes after you wake up, because I think the rationale is you don't want the coffee to do the job that you want the body to do, to wake up. Because when you wake up in the morning, naturally your cortisol levels start to rise and everything happens in the body to wake you up. The coffee just puts it into hyperdrive and makes it even more active. Whereas if you let the body do its job, it will do it quite well. But if you take too much coffee all the time, the body gets lazy and probably doesn't do it as well as it should do.
Yeah.
You know,
I certainly enjoy it at 60 minutes to 90 minutes in. And I mean, coming back to the morning routine, the other thing that I've started doing recently, and I know you mentioned that your breathing app mentions gratitude. So for me, I've now, because Sabi came back from a yoga retreat where she's adopted a mantra. So I've been thinking about a mantra as well. And I've also started journaling, but very basic journaling in the morning. So I've adopted those two things. So as I'm doing my yoga, just before I start my yoga, I'm doing a little bit of deep breathing, and I'm saying a few things to myself to ground myself and then start the day. And also, before I set off on my drive, I've started to journal a few things because I'm not so good at journaling at the end of the day. But
like I was going to ask, why did you choose in the morning rather than during the day, or last thing at night before you go to sleep is another time that people do journal?
Yeah, you know, I think it's. I often find there's other things I want to do in the evening. But like you said, I think the morning is where you really do have more control of the day, and it's how I want to start my day. So I'm starting the day with a few key questions, and this was from Rangan Chatterjee, who was saying these maybe things.
He does Feel Better, Live More as a podcast, doesn't he?
Yeah. So the things I'm saying to myself is, what is my priority for the day? What am I grateful for? And what is my attitude going to be for the day? And if I get time for myself and I'm not rushing too much, what went well yesterday and what do I want to go better today? So normally my priorities I've mentioned to you is driving safely to work with purpose and some grace if I can manage it.
That's usually down to other people on the roads rather than yours. You can be driven that way, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, we've both got
especially over here.
We've both got new cars, and adaptive cruise control I think is brilliant. So I just set it at a reasonable speed, and it's adjusting. And I'm listening to podcasts. I'm not watching. So I say to myself, you know, I'm going to drive with purpose and with some grace and safely. The other thing I'm going to generally say I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for my health and sanity. And the attitude I take into my day, which is one I tend not to have, is I'm generally a pessimist or I'm a worrier by nature. And I'm always a planner and I'm cautious. And I've tried to shed that. And I now say I'm going to approach the day with optimism. And that has not been something I've generally brought into my life. And I'm finding that it makes me a lot more chilled out and less anxious and worried. And I'm not planning for things, I'm just optimistic.
I think absolutely right, and I've certainly noticed that with you. You're very open to suggestions, and you're not sort of blinkered and saying this is what I'm going to do and nothing is going to sway me from this line. You know, you're quite malleable in as far as how you do things and what you do.
I never used to be like that.
No, and I think we can echo that for both of us. I mean, I think the kind of routines we've been adopting, it's a slow burn, but they are changing who we are by the neurons and the synapses that are sort of firing away and changing our thought processes. And I know in other talks we'll probably discuss more about things like mental health and metabolic health and health in general. But I think what you're doing in your getting up early, setting a routine, taking control of the day, doing your yoga, adopting your exercises as well, is all a way of controlling the mind in that you are telling it what it's got to do, and therefore it's less likely to control you. And I think that is going to have a big effect in how you plan and how the day rolls out, I guess. And I've just, from my own personal experience, I know I'm a lot calmer now when I'm sat in the office. And we all get bad emails coming through. I mean, some more often than others, you know, some days more often than others. But I don't react to them anywhere near as aggressively as I used to. I'm much more considered, and I'll probably avoid it for a little while, because I think stress is one of those things that's ever present in today's life, whether it's at home or at work or driving, especially over here. I think stress is the killer, and if you're constantly stressed, and I know the old adage is when the lion comes around the corner and your cortisol level needs to come up and you're in your fight or flight sympathetic nervous system kicks in, bang, you're gone, you know. But your body, chemically, biologically, sees that as a stress, but it also sees a bad email as stress, and will have the same impact of generating cortisol and all the other negative things in the body to get you prepared to run or fight or even freeze, you know, as a result. So in today's society, anything we can do to reduce stress, I think is critical.
Yeah, I would say you're right. I'd say stress and being sedentary. So what I'm now doing is during the day, because I noticed I was just sitting the whole day. I've set an alarm on my PC.
Good.
So every hour that goes off, and I remind myself to drink more water, or if I can, get up from my desk and walk. And I work on the 9th floor of a tower building. So now at least once or twice a day, and the weather's quite good at the moment, I walk up and down the stairs, and that's quite a long walk. But I go very slowly, I'm not out of breath. And when it gets hotter here in the Middle East, that may be difficult because the stairwells get very hot.
Yeah.
But I'm now walking, drinking water, so I'm finding I'm less sedentary, less prone to backache, which is a big thing for somebody who's spent 35 years sitting at a desk and driving all the time. And I also find, like you said, I'm less stressed because I'm in that 1 hour. I'm also at that 1 hour alarm point. I'm either walking or I'm trying to breathe better. So that's really helping me. Do you do certain things during the day that helps you?
Similar to you. I mean, I think you and I have been chatting about this for so many years now that we're feeding off each other, and it's difficult to know who said what when, because we're both sort of just adopting these things as we hear about them. But unlike you, I'm acutely aware that you have to move, and I've heard enough podcasts and I've heard enough specialists in this particular area to say it's a sitting down, slow death, as you put it. You know, when you sat down for too long, for hours on end, in the same position, and that's the worrying part. So one of the things I've done, and it sounds rather odd in some cases, but if I print out a document, I will often print out a page at a time, because the printer is at the other end of where I'm working, as in not in the same room, it's in another room altogether. But equally, when I'm scanning things, I will scan a page at a time.
Okay.
Because I know it sounds rather excessive.
but what else are you going to do?
Exactly. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's a choice that I can make. If I sat there and thinking, wow, I've been sat here for too long, and I know I have to scan something in, I will do it a page at a time, because then I know I have to walk up and down the building or the floor or the corridor to change the paper over. And it's just being cognizant, I think, and being aware that you have to keep moving. And you've set an alarm. I do have, from my lovely wife Karen, bought me an hourglass, which I sometimes use and say, once that hour is up, if I haven't moved, I've got to go and do something. Even if it's making a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, but get up and move around. So absolutely vital.
So if we come towards the afternoon and then evening, so for me, I'm then driving back for an hour and a half, and I'm again trying to drive calmly. I don't do my breathing techniques in the evening. And then when I'm back, I try and go to the gym, and usually we're having quite an early supper, I would say around 6 o'clock in the evening. And in England, I think people generally eat around 7, maybe 8. But we're eating at 5:36. I mean, it's a very early dinner, which I think is better.
Agreed.
And then I have a bedtime routine. So around 9:30, I'm finding all of the lights are being reduced, very low lighting. I'm not quite thinking, maybe in the Middle Ages when people had candlelight and that's it. But, really reducing the light. staying away from the telephone as much as possible. And I find, because I started my day at 5 and I got a bit of natural light at that time, come 9:30, 10 o'clock, if I'm anywhere near a bed, I am out like a light. And that has really affected me in a positive way, and it has addressed what used to be so difficult for me. I used to be up until 1 o'clock in the morning, not sleeping, watching TV, not doing anything that's particularly useful, exhausted the following day at work. And that went on for years. And I think my lack of sleep meant that during the day I was quite edgy, I was struggling to manage stress, quite stressed, high cortisol levels. I mean, it's really been very, very difficult. But now, it seems to be working very well. My hands have been on the screen, sorry. And but now I'm such a relief.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm asleep by 10:30, maybe 11, and I'm up at 5, so 6-7 hours sleep. I don't know if it's not enough. Maybe I should be sleeping 8, 9, 10 hours, but I just can't seem to get there. Maybe I will eventually. Yeah. But now I have 7.5 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours sleep, and I feel pretty good, much better than I used to.
That's good, and I think that's...
Have you ever slept 10 hours? 11 hours?
And I suppose, at some point I would have done, if I had been sleep deprived for a few days beforehand, or my body clock is completely thrown out, maybe...
So how many hours do you sleep?
7.5, give or take 7.5. I do have a routine where, as like you, I wake up at the same time, but I'm generally in bed for about 10:30, 11 o'clock, which then give me my 7.5 hours sleep. And I do feel quite fresh in the morning, so that's a good indicator that I'm getting enough. Because you're working where you're working, it's probably difficult to go and have a little afternoon nap, for example. But there is evidence to say that if people can't get their full 7.5 or 8 or 7, depending on where they are at night sleep, there's no reason why you can't split it a little bit, just by taking a 20-minute nap, 30-minute nap. Everyone has a different area, because you don't want to go too deep. You just want to go and just enough time to reset the hippocampus, to download that memory from there to the long-term memory, to freeze it back up again so that you can feel fresher and your mind's a lot clearer for the rest of the afternoon. But if you can't, I try to every now. If I'm here in Bahrain, I sometimes, depending on how active I am, I may have a little nap of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, including Riyadh. And I find that as long as I do it before 3 o'clock, I'm okay. If I make the mistake or just happen to sit down somewhere for too long and just fall asleep at 5 or 6, it ruined my going to sleep at 10:30, 11. I'd be tossing and turning for a good hour or so. So that's, I think, something we have to be aware of, not to take those naps whenever. There are times you only do about halfway through your waking cycle, and that will be between 1 and 3 o'clock. But if you can't manage that, then you have to try and get as much sleep in as you can to make you feel comfortable when you wake up.
So I think a natural extension of this conversation would be then, what are you eating for dinner, or and what type of exercise you're doing? But that's probably for another conversation. I think, gosh,
absolutely.
23 minutes ago.
We have chatted away, and the 23 minutes flew.